Hello, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 2 of Linux User Space. I'm Dan.
And I'm Leo. And Dan, you've piqued my interest. You were talking in the pre-show about Docker business, reverse proxying, and all kinds of crazy stuff. What even is any of this?
All right, so I've been messing around a little bit with Traefik, which is a reverse proxy, but it's a reverse proxy not just for Docker, but is really in tune with Docker. So I know you are very interested in Docker and been messing around with some containers. So first, what is a reverse proxy? All right, so that takes your requests from the internet, and then it passes them down to your things behind, so it sits in front of all that, right? It handles all your requests. It can be your SSL or TLS termination point, so it can handle all of your certificates for your things, so that you can do encrypted traffic between your clients and the servers, which is really important.
That kind of ties into the whole Let's Encrypt jazz, right? So you're able to use Let's Encrypt certificates with this?
It does. So Traefik handles all of your Let's Encrypt certificates for you. For all of the services that you put behind it as behind the reverse proxy, it handles all of those certificates for each one that you stand up.
All right. So correct me if I'm wrong. So a lot of people, especially people that run services at home, will use a reverse proxy to allow, to run like a website or to do various internet things like run a Nextcloud service from home, and they'll use that reverse proxy to capture whatever internet traffic is coming to it. That way, you don't necessarily have your Nextcloud server sitting for real out on the internet. That reverse proxy is at least one step away.
Yep, adds a layer, and it can take those requests coming in. You can have one IP address with multiple DNS names, and it can see that you're coming in looking at a certain DNS name, and then send it off to the service that it needs to go off to.
Right, because before, had you been doing this before, it was basically IP address, and then you had a port number, and if you needed more than that, you kind of were out of luck. You had to have another IP address to attach those ports to, and this reverse proxy kind of simplifies all that, allows you to say, nextcloud.leochavez.org, and then it takes you right where you need to go, even if that server is hosted at home or in DigitalOcean or wherever you're running your stuff, right?
So here's another great thing, whereas Traefik, as you're in Docker as a reverse proxy, has an API. So it will look at the other Docker containers that you have stood up in there, and you apply some labels to the applications that you have running. And for each one of those that you add, it does the reverse proxying for you. Well, almost automatically. Not quite though. So it's really, really great. They go hand in hand, very close.
So I'm already interested. So okay, so you're running this reverse proxy thing that will route traffic for you to all your various things. What various things are you routing traffic to?
Well, right now, what am I running?
Yeah.
Not much. I'm really just getting a handle on it. I've got a couple of little things stood up. One of them that I did was the company that's behind Traefik is called Containus, and they have one that's called a Who Am I container. And then the other thing that I'm looking at doing is I'm actually looking at moving my Nextcloud into Docker, and using this as the reverse proxy into that.
Very cool.
So yeah, I have a couple things. Oh, I have a Portainer container stood up too, which is you use that to manage your Docker things. So I've got a couple little things that I've got there that I'm really just messing around with right now, but trying to get a feel of it, how it all works. And yeah, that's my ultimate goal. Probably stand up Nextcloud.
That's pretty cool. So I'm probably going to have to lurk behind you as you do all of this stuff, because while I love the snap of Nextcloud, one of the things that it does not great is self-signed certificates, because every single time there's an upgrade, it seems like the self-signed certificate changes. So it makes everything mad. Everything that you have already connected up to it is mad now because the certificate is different.
I've noticed the same thing, and especially so with my phone, it seems like. So
yes. Oh, that big red bar? Oh, yeah. No, you got no.
That's the thing that I want to, sync automatically without my intervention, honestly, right? So like my pictures and my contacts both go into Nextcloud, without me thinking about it until it updates on its own because it's a snap and, the certificate changed and I have to go in and accept it again.
Right. Because you kind of hit it on the head with that one, the phone thing. I need my photos to dump. And I don't want to have to like press OK like 14 times to make it do that. I mean, I already have to keep the app open the whole time because that's just how the app works. That's fine, whatever. But the fact that you got to deal with the certificate jazz if it's self-signed is kind of annoying.
Yep.
So, yeah, that's something I would like to fix, and I think you can fix that. I mean,
I'm sure
with this reverse proxy, you could just slap a Let's Encrypt cert on it.
Well, and you can actually put a Let's Encrypt on your Nextcloud snap if you wanted to and wanted it exposed to the internet.
Right. And that's my thing. That's where I drew the line.
Yep.
I didn't want it attached to the internet, so there was no way I could really do a Let's Encrypt thing. So it was self-signed or nothing, and I didn't want nothing.
Right.
But, man, the amount of headache it gives me sometimes makes me think, I don't need encryption, right?
Yeah.
No, I can't go that far.
No, encryption is really important, especially for your personal information. I feel like that's the only way to be.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. The other thing that really gives me grief is Gnome will allow you to attach a Nextcloud account. And the last time I was doing a live stream for Mintcast, it kept popping up, the little thing, hey, this Nextcloud certificate. And it's like, really? In the middle of every, and I have to, and it wouldn't ever accept. I would say, accept forever. And then it was like, no, we need you to press that again. Why?
Yeah.
Why?
I said forever, right? Yeah, no.
Yeah. And so I guess it was a conflict between the old cert and the new cert, and Gnome was getting all weirded out about it, and it was so annoying. It finally stopped, but I just want one self-signed cert that does not change. That's what I want. Yeah,
and then you have all the browsers bark at you for having a self-signed cert because unless you import the certificate into your trusted certificate, place, they'll all complain because it's not in, the internet of things. So,
but at the very least with that one, when you say accept cert, it will accept the cert. Yep. On the phone, it's hit or miss. On Gnome, it's hit or miss. But with the browser, at least when I press go, it goes.
Yeah.
So I'm okay there.
It does add it, but if you use a different browser, different computer, whatever,
right.
You're all over again, right? Yeah.
I get that, and I understand why that is, but it's the same phone every time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. So I suggest you check that out. I mean, I know you're really into Docker stuff these days, and I don't know what other things you have. Your Git. You can run
my fresh RSS.
Yep, you can run those things behind Traefik, and it'll have a certificate for it. It'll automatically do it for you.
That's super duper cool. I'm definitely gonna dive into that.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's not terribly hard. I feel like you could definitely do it if you're spinning these other things up. This isn't that much more.
Dan, all right. I was very confident a minute ago that I was going to be able to do all of this, and then you said it's not the way you said it. I think it was.
I'm sorry.
Very hard. And now I feel like it's just going to be impossible, and I'm going to be scratching my head at 4 o'clock in the morning, cursing you, Dan.
Well, you might, but no, I don't think so on this one.
Why did you tell me about this?
No. Yeah. I think this is in your wheelhouse. I really do.
I dig it.
Up next is a public service announcement. If you're running Ubuntu or one of the flavors of 2010, you should look at upgrading as soon as possible, especially after this episode releases. I believe it's Thursday after the episode releases. We're going to release on Monday. That Thursday, end of life 2010. And you need to upgrade to 2104. That'd be the next. That's the upgrade path.
That was the Gorilla.
Yeah, no more Groovy Gorilla.
Oh, that was the best one.
But we're going to move on to the Hippo. The hirsute Hippo. The hairy hippo guy.
I heard the opinions on the image of that one. I just really enjoyed the Gorilla. I mean,
it's super fun, right?
Well,
There's been a few of them that have been super fun. So Disco Dingo, that guy was pretty cool. And the Ewan Ermin, I thought he just kind of looked good. And then Groovy Gorilla, yeah, those are some of my favorites.
So Disco Dingo is my absolute favorite, absolute favorite. But Groovy Gorilla, that one's got a special. Well, number one, because it's groovy. I mean, already that's awesome. But the other thing was that Ubuntu ran a contest on Twitter asking what you've done with the new, because Groovy Gorilla was the first time that Raspberry Pi had a full real Ubuntu release and everything worked, right? So, I was one of the first few folks. I mean, because I used it to do a couple of episodes of a podcast. So, I sent that in, and they sent me a shirt. So, I have a Groovy Gorilla shirt that I'm not wearing today that it should have been in honor of all of this. But, anyway, so it's just a little extra close to my heart.
Well, you can wear it on Thursday, and then,
I will, so we can see him off one last time.
So I'll have some links in the show notes. On the announcement, and but make sure and upgrade. Here's why we're actually going to touch on this in a later topic, but keeping up to date is very important to mitigate vulnerabilities and security problems.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Oh, you mean like Windows and Print Nightmare and how it took about 3 separate patches to fix it?
Yeah, and maybe still not quite 100%, right? Yeah, no.
Look, man, just turn your print spooler off. That's the answer.
Well, it is the answer. Certainly don't turn it on where you don't need it. And the one thing that they warned you about, and I'm like wondering why it was even enabled in the first place, was your domain controller. Yeah, don't do that.
Yeah. Why is the print spooler on the domain controller? Stop attaching things to your domain controller. It does domain controlling. That's what it does.
Yeah, one purpose, please.
Yeah. Well, Groovy Gorilla, press F in the chat, give it a salute, shed one tear. We will see you again sometime.
So do you normally follow the upgrade path, or do you nuke and pave, Leo?
I used to be a staunch nuke and paver. I was ruined so many times with mostly with Windows upgrades, and so that kind of burrowed into my brain when I moved over to Linux, and so I avoided it there too. But I mean, now I just upgrade. Things just work. I've run on. Mostly it's the Ubuntus, and I feel like it's a lot of the work of the Ubuntu folks that make this so amazing. And on the Fedora side too, I've upgraded on Fedora too.
Excellent as well.
But those two ecosystems, I have no qualms about upgrading anymore. It feels like a regular update to me that requires me to reboot.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I'll agree wholeheartly. I generally follow the upgrade path as well. In fact, I upgraded my work machine today. And and that machine has started off at 1810 and is now on 2104.
Wow.
So
yeah. Okay.
So that's gone really well for me. Of course, usual caveats. Back up before you do this, and make sure you have a good backup before you proceed. But I've had very good luck. It's always gone well. One thing you have to do in Ubuntu is if you have any, repositories that you've added, they will get disabled in the upgrade, and then you just have to re-enable them after the fact.
Right. So this kind of leads me to one thing that I've been tinkering around with over the past week or so, and that is ButterFS. So, I mean, it's every single kernel, I swear there's about a laundry list of things that ButterFS does better this time.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's got me really interested in, I mean, just running it. So the real reason that I wanted to run it was the snapshots.
Yeah.
I mean, those are inherent to ButterFS. You don't need any external software to handle it. I think Snapper does a great job of doing that, but TimeShift is easy.
Yeah.
So I've used TimeShift for a long time in Linux Mint using rsync to roll back, and that has worked the majority of the time. And I've had it where some stuff didn't actually restore correctly. So it's been kind of wishy-washy for me on that. But every time I've been on a ButterFS system and I've used TimeShift, everything is amazing. Everything is picture perfect. I mean, the backups take no time at all. The restores, I swear they're even faster than the backups. And the entire experience is just very easy.
Yeah, it's mainstream at this point.
It really is. And I was worried about, I had to test this out in a VM, but I was worried about setting up ButterFS in general and whether or not it was going to set up the sub-volumes so that TimeShift could take advantage of them and split root and home and all this kind of weird jazz that you got to do with ButterFS to make the snapshots work properly. But it turns out if you just make your partitions that like you normally would, and your main partition, just mark it as ButterFS. Don't do anything special. Don't cut it up any. One partition for everything. Mark it ButterFS. When you install, you immediately have your root volume and a sub volume for home.
Yeah.
Making it super trivial to do those quick TimeShift backups.
I think you nailed it. One partition, and then the sub volumes get created for you, which is kind of great. And because honestly, do you need to be backing up all of those other sub volumes like you do your home one? Your home one is really important, right? And that's the one that you really want to target because that's where all your stuff is.
I'm the opposite actually. So
really?
I mean my home gets backed up differently. My home gets backed up to Nextcloud. So I'm not too worried about much of that stuff. I'm worried about when I do something stupid in the system and I don't want to have to reinstall.
Well, it's nice having those things too. Yeah, absolutely. I'll agree with you.
But the great thing about a TimeShift backup versus something like an rsync backup is that you have, well, it seems like the differential backup in TimeShift works way, way better. So, I mean, what that means is it only keeps track of the changes to the files as opposed to just copying the files. Right. And so TimeShift, I mean, the backups are way smaller. And I think that is really the reason why it takes so little time to back up and restore, because all it's doing is rolling back the changes that have happened instead of replacing whole files.
And essentially, I'm doing that as well. I'm using Restic. I don't know if you're familiar with that one, but that does incremental backups, and so I can copy, my home partition or whatever I want. I can you can tell it which folders basically to back up, and it does incremental backups. So and you can mount that. You can mount that backup, if you will, and pull stuff off at any time. If you really dork it up, you can mount it from a live ISO even. It's that good. So it's very similar to what you're doing. It's just a little different.
Yeah, and I've always appreciated TimeShift. I was so excited when it got added to Linux Mint by default, and now I'm just chomping at the bit to just upgrade everything to ButterFS. Everything is ext4. So the whole reason I brought this up was because of the question of nuke and pave. Now, I normally upgrade, but in a case like this, I would rather just
convert file systems. I don't know how much I recommend that. You're right. Probably starting over again if you're going to change your file systems is not a bad idea.
Exactly, because not only would I have to convert, I would also have to create those subvolumes and mount them properly and all by hand. I don't trust myself enough to do that. I'll let the system handle that.
Sure.
So yeah, for sure, man.
That's fair.
It looks super cool. I'm so excited. The reason that got me on it was because 5.13 had some SSD speed ups with ButterFS, and I'm just so excited to eventually get everything over to it. It'll be cool.
It's time for our Mozilla Watch.
Mozilla Watch.
And so, big announcement, actually. Version 90? Say that? That's been released.
9.0.
Yeah. One little caveat with that. No more FTP for you.
No more.
No more.
We're done. Absolutely done. You are insecure. Well, sort of.
Well, it kind of is. FTP needs to go away in general, but that's a different...
It does.
Yeah, I get you.
We have SFTP now.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
For the past 2 decades. So
I know.
Maybe it's time.
Yeah, and I think most operating systems will handle that with some application at somewhere.
I mean, look, if you have to, PowerShell has SSH and SFTP built in.
It does.
So I mean, if it comes down to it, you're like, I don't want a GUI thing. I don't want WinSCP. Let me just use the command line. It works. Totally works. Or you could just use WSL or something, right?
And macOS has it as well. So I mean,
right. So
it's all built
everybody supports it.
It does now.
Let's. Yeah, I think this is the last push because Chromium got rid of it back in one of their 80-something versions as well. Isn't that right?
I think so.
So Mozilla's actually slow to the party. So they had been supporting FTP for a lot longer than a lot of other folks.
Well, it hasn't been on. You had to go in there and fiddle with some things, and some flags and turn it back on because they've had it off for a little while. They actually talked about this over a year ago. So this has been in the works for a bit. So it shouldn't be a shock to anybody. But
if you cared about this, I would assume that the internet was super outraged back in March of 2020 when it was proposed.
Yeah.
And then again in April 2020 when it was announced that it was going to happen. And then again around March of 2021 when Firefox 88, the nightlies and the betas for those didn't have it enabled.
Yeah.
And then I guess we can finally, the last time we can finally be outraged about FTP going away in Firefox 90.
Yeah, and honestly, what are you doing FTP in your browser for?
Yeah, FileZilla exists, but I don't know, like tons of things exist.
Yeah, I just don't know. It just seems like not a great tool to be using.
Right. I mean, TLS 1.0 still exists. Does it mean we should still use it?
Right.
No. No. So one of the things that I think got people kind of in a tizzy was that the browser settings.ftp protocol enabled in the about config in Firefox, that doesn't do anything anymore. You used to be able to go into about, if you really wanted FTP, right? You used to be able to go into about.config. You used to find this particular thing. You used to set it to true, and then you could still do it, and it wouldn't bother you about it anymore. But now it's just a placebo. It won't do anything.
Yep.
You turn it to true, and it'll just ignore it because that is a read-only value anymore. So, kind of sad, but I don't know. Yeah, I think me and Dan both agree. It was time. FTP should have been put to bed a long time ago. It's kind of nice that, at least in the browsers, it's pretty much done.
Yeah, exactly.
But don't fear. Don't fear. There is a new protocol handler for FTP that Firefox exposes to extensions. So if you really want it, you absolutely have to have it.
There's a lot of extensions that you can add. I don't know if it's one I'm going to add, but yeah, you can add an extension probably and do all that if you really wanted to.
Yeah, I appreciate that there is no actual FTP in my life. There are file transfers, but none of them are over that particular protocol. So I do appreciate that. So this won't affect me too terribly much. No. But if you're still FTP, and this'll hit you.
Hey, I grew up on that, so I understand where you're coming from. But longer the days.
Yep, definitely so. And they made another switch too. They switched off FTP and they switched on DNS over HTTPS in Canada.
Yeah,
that's
Canada.
The place.
Well, they've had it on here in the US for a while. So now it's switched on in Canada.
Yes. So in Canada, they have the Canadian Internet Registration Authority. They have joined Mozilla's TRR program, which is the Trusted Recursive Resolver Program. This is basically Mozilla's stamp of approval on, yeah, you can do DNS for the masses. And for those of you that have never heard of the TRR, the idea with that is they require you to follow 3 rules to be one of their recursive resolvers. And one of those is limiting data collection and retention, ensuring transparency for any data retention that does occur, and limiting any potential use of the resolver to block access or modify content. So they don't want you changing where you're going. You know, if you type in google.com, it takes you to google.com, not some modified version somewhere else or something like that.
I think all of those are very good things. Yeah, I think it's a good thing. I know it prompts you when you first open up Firefox for the first time. It says, do you want to, enable this secure DNS over HTTPS lookup? And so you can opt in or opt out at that time when it first comes up.
Yeah, I think technically it's an opt out because it's on by default and you just say okay, but the other option is turn it off.
Right, and it goes away real quick, right, if you don't click on it. But you can opt out at that time if you're quick enough.
Right. So, I think that's the right way to do opt-ins and opt-outs, especially when it has to do with your personal data, right? And I mean, any website that you type into the address bar is your personal data. And so the first launch, as long as you read the box, right, they're very upfront with what they are going to do with this. And, I think overall, DOH is a good thing.
Yeah, I got some feelings on it, but
oh boy!
Before we leave this, you wrote this in here, and it says 1% of the Canadian Firefox users will see this change this month here in July, and it's just going to gradually ramp up until everybody gets it in September.
That's it. So, I mean, the Canadian Internet Registration Authority are not the only options, right? Cloudflare and NextDNS are also going to be options. So you have choice. It doesn't have to be them,
which is good.
But what do you think about DNS over HTTPS in general? What do you think it does right? What do you think it does wrong?
Well, I think it's a great thing for those that don't have another solution. But for me, I set up DNS on my machines to go to the places that I want them to go to, and I do it on a per machine basis. I don't want my browser, dictating where, which DNS it's going to use. I want my browser to follow the rest of my system. At least that's my personal opinion on it. I don't think these are bad DNS options to use. But having some local DNS things happening here on my network, I'd rather it stuck with my system, if that makes sense to you.
I see. Yeah, I do. And because I have the same stuff. I have a lot of, I don't know, I've got at least a dozen domain names running around here.
Right.
But I've never run into any issues with it. DOH is on, I never turn it off on any of the Firefox machines. I think Cloudflare is the default. But my local DNS records are always prioritized over anything else. I think the one caveat with that is if I type in my DNS name and put a / at the end of it, it will always go local. Always.
Yep. I don't know. I'd rather it didn't mess with that, right? Well,
it's a control thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, I set it up for a reason, and I wanted to follow that, please.
Right, exactly. I think it does by default. I don't do any kind of weird shenanigans.
Yeah, but like here and at work, both places, I've got custom DNS things that I want it to follow, so please do that.
Right. Well, at work, you've got another argument, especially when you're doing like content inspection or DNS inspection, or just kind of get an idea of where folks are spending their time throughout the day or something like that. So, there's an argument there because if you obfuscate your DNS searches, which is what DOH kind of does, it's obfuscated between you and whoever you've chosen. And if you didn't choose anybody, it's Cloudflare, or in Canada, it's the Canadian Internet Registration Authority. They will know.
Right.
Technically, they will know.
But they're not collecting it according to the agreement, which is great. And so where I love the idea of DOH is on my phone, when I'm out and about and like in a public setting, like I know it obfuscates that, right? But that's kind of the idea. Like you get on a public LAN of any sort, something you don't trust and don't control, then I think this is a great thing.
Absolutely. So so if you were on a public Wi-Fi or something, like you went to Starbucks, you brought your laptop out because, I don't know, for some reason you're just going to do a bunch of work there.
Yeah.
What would you rather have? Would you rather have a VPN or would you rather have DOH?
Well, I'd like at least DOH and maybe my VPN too, depending on what kind of work things I'm doing, right? But if I'm just surfing some web pages and stuff, I'd kind of like to, not leave that with the coffee shop.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So DOH is my bare minimum. I would definitely agree with that. And I think it's a good thing in general.
Yep.
Because you're it's just like a VPN though, right? I mean, you're shifting trust.
You do. Yeah, absolutely.
But the most important thing about DOH though is that it encrypts your DNS queries.
Yes.
So if anybody were to gather up this data from you, they wouldn't be able to figure out what it actually was or what it meant or where you went or even that it was necessarily DNS.
Right.
So
yeah, and it's a couple layers down too, right? Because it's not going to be, if you're at the coffee shop, it's not going to be the coffee shop. It's not going to be their internet, service provider, and it might not even be their internet service provider, depending on how many layers deep you are. So it's going to be way far down before anybody can read into that.
Right. And the alternative is DNS as it exists today, which is, your
that's in the wide open
regular old. Yeah, exactly. So that means that every single place that packet hits, it is.
It's discoverable.
Not saying that it's discoverable. Yeah, it's discoverable. That's the word. There you go. So not necessarily that anybody's looking at it, just that it can be looked at.
Yeah, totally
if anybody
available.
cared to.
Yep.
So overall, I think DOH is good. I think we're moving in the right direction. DOH is not the end of the story. I feel like DOH is going to be one prong in a multi-pronged way to just make our privacy a priority. Right. I appreciate that Microsoft, they were the first to enable DOH, and then slowly Chrome and Brave and everybody else decided to add that function. Well, Chromium decided to add that functionality in there. So I appreciate that they're pushing us forward in this whole privacy thing.
I agree.
It's really good.
Yeah. And, Mozilla right there at the forefront, right? Protecting you every time, right?
Every time.
That's why we love them. Okay. This next topic is, it might be a hornet's nest that's been kicked a couple of times.
Nobody knows what Audacity is, Dan. Nobody has heard of this program. Nobody.
Well, it is a program that we've recommended in the past, so I feel like we should have a stance on
using it. Yeah, well, I definitely have a stance on it, but nobody started using it. You think?
Well, I mean, we didn't know about it until the kerfuffle happened. That's for sure. And so,
yeah, I think a lot of people know about it now.
Yeah, and well, let's face it, it's widely used on multiple platforms, not just Linux. It's on all the other platforms too, and pretty popular, I think, among all of them.
Yeah, I have a track record this episode of bringing up Windows for some reason, but I would imagine that the vast majority of Audacity installs are on Windows.
Yeah, it could be. There's not a real great alternative there. And actually, we're going to talk about some alternatives later in the show, so I'll save a little bit of that. So what the whole kerfuffle is, Audacity has decided to, collect a little bit of your data, and
a little bit, just some, a little bit,
some, but only at certain times, maybe, I don't know. So we'll give a link to the clarification that Audacity had with what they're collecting and what they're using it for down in the show notes.
Well, wait. A clarification. That means that they had said something before that they needed to clarify. What do you mean, clarify?
Well, they had kind of retracted some of what they were going to collect and whatnot. They reversed course, and then all of a sudden it's back there again.
So I think what they came out and clarified. Well, okay, before that, they essentially put out some information that was like, we're adding telemetry to Audacity. That's basically the idea. They didn't necessarily go too terribly far into what telemetry was, but
well, people freak out when that happens. Yeah.
Well, I mean, they said the telemetry word. They said the T word, and that's a curse word in a lot of FOSS communities, just simply because a lot of that stuff is not necessarily compatible with the licenses that we're dealing with on a day-to-day, right?
Exactly.
So they put out, well, we're going to do some telemetry stuff, and it came out, they saw in one of the early releases of 3.0.3, there was this line, this information that was, we're gonna grab some of this stuff, and well, that was the flashpoint. That was when astute folks looking at what Muse Group is doing to Audacity, they perked up at that point, and so dug in a little bit.
Right.
And give it about 24 hours, and every FOSS publication will take that and clickbait the crap out of it. Because you had titles like Audacity is now a possible spyware.
Right.
Remove it as soon as possible.
I'll argue against the spyware, and here's why I'll argue against spyware. Spyware is something that collects your data without your knowledge.
Right.
And so it's not that.
And while I will agree that they fumbled the communication.
Oh, for sure.
They were pretty upfront that they're going to start gathering data in an opt-out kind of fashion, right? So you're opt-in the beginning, you got to go in and opt out, and everything is cool. But, right. So that was the flashpoint. That's where this all started.
Yeah. And so one of the deals is it's opt out, so it happens automatically for you.
And that's a no-no.
Yeah, no, that seems bad, right? It should probably prompt you and say, hey, look, if you want to help us, make Audacity better, click here and submit, trouble reports or, whatever. Like it should ask you at the beginning.
Even Microsoft does that. But
I know.
The whole point of me bringing it up about Firefox earlier on, which is with their DNS over HTTPS, the first thing they ask you is it cool to keep doing this, or do you want to turn it off? Be upfront about it. Now, the thing about this, though, is that nobody knows, because it's not actually written, how it was going to present itself.
Yep, we don't know how it's going to be implemented. It could be like that.
That could have totally been the plan, but again, you're in FOSS.
Yeah.
Everything should be done in the open.
Yeah.
So if you have an idea to add telemetry, it's usually good to talk about that first and explain how you're going to implement it. And, maybe you don't get yelled at all the time.
Right. So one of the things that they did retract from was where they were going to store the collection potentially, and some of it they haven't retracted from. Like the tools they were going to use before really raised a lot of red flags, and now even still, so where they're going to store it could potentially be, somewhere where you don't want your data stored potentially, I suppose.
Right, because the original storage location was going to be here in the U.S.
Right.
with Google.
Yeah.
But also in China with Yandex.
Right.
Yeah. That was the first time I saw them back down on anything, was that point. And they immediately said, well, okay, it was a couple of days, but they came back and they said, okay, fine. We'll store it ourselves. We won't share it with anybody.
Right.
And so yeah, oof.
Yeah, that was a big boo-boo there. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So beyond that, what they said is for data collection is it's not gonna be as bad as some people are making it out to be potentially. I think the most personal thing that they're going to actually collect is going to be your IP address. And they're not going to use any of this. They're not going to sell any of it. They're only going to use it for, if there's problem reports or stuff like that. And probably to know how many installs and things like that. They're going to collect that sort of number. But they're not going to sell any of that to anybody else.
Right. And I mean, so long as they stick to their word, then that's cool. That's great.
Right.
But there's another line in that pull request that said that, I can't remember the exact wording, but it was basically to the effect of, as needed, we'll share this data with law enforcement.
Yeah, boy, that's scary.
Man, like,
what are you gonna
get it.
like? What are you sharing? You're gonna share my recordings? I mean, like, how far is that gonna go? I'm sure you go right to the top with your thinking on once you start sharing with law enforcement, and how eager are you going to be to share that data with law enforcement is also what I'm wondering. I'd like to see it like compelled by court kind of, subpoena thing before you go sharing my data. Thank you.
Yeah. And so that is part of the clarification that they did come back and say, we're not just going to give it to them for no reason.
Yeah, thank you.
We will be compelled by a court of law.
But when you don't have to give them anything is when you don't collect it. You don't have to give it away either.
Exactly. And that point is not lost on me. I mean, that the IP address information should be throwaway data that you do not store for any reason, because outside of location to see, the majority of our users are in the U.S.
Sure.
You don't have to store the IP address for any length of time to just gather that data and just say, I'm done with it.
Yeah, you can analyze that pretty quick, I think. Yeah.
You could just be done with it and not actually store it. So the point is not lost on me that they're keeping more than they should. But, I mean, the fact that as long as they are being truthful, there's no selling, no sharing, and they won't be giving it to any law enforcement without being compelled by a court. So those were two of the big issues that I saw come out immediately when that stuff started to really kind of come out. But in that clarification, and again, here's where we still don't know the whole story. We don't know how they're going to implement this. I don't know if you can just remain offline from the moment you install the software. There will be an offline mode that is not affected by the privacy policy at all. So all this IP addressing and whatever, all this stuff does not apply to you if you run it in offline mode. Now, will they, prompt you the first time you launch Audacity, launch in offline mode, and then you're never touched by it? Or is it you launch it, you're on the internet, you better have the network cable unplugged before you launch it, so you're always in offline mode, and then go in and turn it on offline mode? Like,
that won't work for us in our scenario, because we're online together talking to each other. You can't disconnect the network cable now.
Right. And so I saw, and I think it's going to be, I don't think this will be the catalyst. I think we've seen a lot of catalysts for it, but there's a lot of naysaying in, I think, Linux communities in general about having an application-based firewall that both Windows and Mac OS have, that I believe we absolutely need, and this is a great case for it.
Well, we have tools that can do that. I don't know. It's not super easy, though, to you can't just go tick a box, right? There's some graphical tools that kind of do some of that. Some are better than others. So you can go in there and you can restrict things, but it is not application-based. It is like typically port-based and whatnot, right?
Yes, exactly. Right, exactly. So as long as you know the ports, you can go into IP tables or UFW or Firewall D or whatever your firewall of choice is and restrict that particular port. But I don't feel like that's going to be very useful, because it'll probably be over HTTPS or something like that.
Yeah, that'll be not good.
Just sending a little XML thingamajig, something. But instead, embrace these package formats called Flatpak and Snap. Because while they are not an application-based firewall, everybody that talked about this network connectivity thing with Audacity would be happy.
Yeah.
If you installed it with Flatpak, you installed Flatseal alongside of it, and just turned the network Audacity toggle off.
Yep.
The end.
Yeah, that's the beauty of a sandbox, right? You can stay in your sandbox, and you can keep the application in the sandbox with you.
Exactly. So while it's not an application-based firewall, I mean, it's more like pulling the plug.
Right.
But I mean, with Audacity, what else do you need? You don't need network. That was the point that a lot of folks were trying to make was, well, Audacity has not needed network connectivity for 20, 30 years now, so why do we need it now? So, okay, install it with Flatpak, turn it off with Flatseal, or command line if that's your thing.
Yeah, you totally can.
Snap is command line only. I don't know of any GUI tool that will do that for you.
No, it doesn't really. No, there's nothing to handle the permissions of the application in a GUI for a Snap. But it is doable.
There should be. There totally should be.
Yeah, I think that's a thing that could happen, right?
Right.
But beyond that, so if you're Debian, or obviously downstream of that, Ubuntu, there's definitely some concern there. And it looks like you don't have to build the application with the network bits enabled at compile time. So I know Debian's looking at this. It has to, fulfill the free software guidelines that they have set. And so then obviously it'll flow through to Ubuntu as well. So there's a Twitter thread here that I'll link that talks about, you don't need to compile Audacity with the network, stuff. And so fear not, everybody's watching out for you anyway.
Yeah, that was Hubert Figuier, and he's one of the Flatpak maintainers for Audacity, and he goes in, took a look at the code,
it's a deep dive.
essentially came out with the opinion that, not just that this is not an opinion, this is absolute fact at this point, that there are environmental variables that you absolutely have to set at compile time for this telemetry stuff to actually work. So
tick those off and you're good.
Exactly. And so what the Debian bug that we just talked about, the Debian bug report, what do you call those things? Bug thingy.
Yeah, bug tracker.
Yeah, no, so that's the one. Yeah. So the tracking that, I mean, I'd heard that Fedora was looking into this as well.
Yeah, I'm sure they are.
Both of those groups, I can almost guarantee you, we're going to come back with all right, we just didn't set the environmental variable, and then we made the deb or RPM package out of it and then put it in the repo. Easy, right?
Yeah.
And Hubert Figuier is going to do the same thing with the Flatpak. I have no doubt that the folks that are putting the snap together are going to do the exact same thing. Those variables will just not be set. So while
that's the majority of everybody in Linux, I mean, unless you're compiling it yourself, that's pretty much everybody, honestly.
Right. So, if you're on Windows and Mac OS, well, you're getting a binary.
Yeah.
So you don't have a choice. You just get what you get. Now, that's where these other cool forks are going to really kind of come in handy for you if you're on Windows or Mac OS using Audacity. You can grab the binary from the forks, which will likely have those environmental variables not set or fully removed, and you won't have to worry about the telemetry. Those of us in Linux, we're fine.
Yeah, we're good.
None of those are going to be set, so we're not going to have to deal with the telemetry, even when, and by the way, 3.03 was going to be the first version that had any semblance of telemetry in it, and nobody has that yet. Those are still in release candidate, so unless you're flying on the bleeding edge, then you've not even seen this yet. But I think we're going to be fine. So us in Linux, we're cool. Those in Windows and Mac, keep an eye on those forks. Those will likely be where you want to go if privacy is your utmost concern when it comes to Audacity.
Yep. So there's a little drama on one of the forks. It looks like the maintainer stepped down.
Yeah, this is the main fork. As far as I understand, this is the most popular fork of Audacity as a result of all of this crazy goings on.
Yeah, so this is a crazy story on top of a crazy story. And apparently he's been threatened from 4chan folks, which is unfortunate. And
Well, that's always fun.
yeah, I mean, people destroying other people. I mean, that's essentially what it boils down to. And I find that unfortunate. But yeah, so that might not be a viable option long term.
Yeah. So the basic backstory to this one is 4chan. Okay, well, let me back
4chan.
up even further. So Cookie Engineer on
Cookie Engineer.
GitHub was the first one to fork. Well, one of the first ones to fork this and really get some popularity behind it. He had did a poll where he put 4 or 5 names.
Yeah. He's just naming the thing. It's kind of crazy.
Right. Yeah, we haven't even gotten to fixing
No
anything
code,
yet.
nothing.
We're naming it.
Yeah, exactly.
And so Tenacity early on looked like it was going to be the one to win. And then 4chan came in, as 4chan does, and tries to kind of steamroll the whole poll, and they ended up voting up Sneedacity. And yeah, and so Sneedacity is it's a Sneed's Feed and Seed Simpsons joke from back in the day, and so funny, it's cool. But what ended up happening was Cookie Engineer decided, well, that I mean, it's a brigade, so they're not true votes anyway. So we're just gonna go with Tenacity.
Yep.
Well, that didn't go too well with the 4chan group. So
no, they're noted for fighting back too.
Right. That is all fact. That is all stuff that we can check up on and actually see what's happening. Yeah. Now we get into what
there's some unknown territory. Yeah, we can't vouch. There's some alleged incidents that have happened, and we can't vouch for that.
Exactly. But the general idea was, after all of this happened, some folks allegedly from 4chan started stalking this person. There was a YouTube video out basically doxing Cookie Engineer. Then 4chan folks supposedly came to his house, started knocking on his windows and doors, scaring everybody inside the house.
That's the weird thing, right? Yeah,
exactly. They doxed him. That was the whole deal.
Yeah.
And then he ended up confronting one of these folks that apparently, allegedly, had breached, apparently there's a security gate or something like that, got inside of that, and confronted Cookie Engineer with a knife and
butterfly
slit
knife.
his arm.
Yeah.
Right, and which are apparently illegal in Germany.
Well,
they're illegal a lot of places, but right. So anyway, and then so that led Cookie Engineer to immediately say family over this thing.
Yeah.
So I'm going to step down, and we're not going to deal with this, and I'm going to let law enforcement handle it. So,
but it totally started with a name. Here's the crazy thing.
Tenacity.
We've got so many crazy names in Linux. Like, this one was not nearly as bad as many of the other things are named. So I feel like, what a thing to start off with.
Yeah. So anyway, we've got links in the show notes if you want to go see that craziness. But yeah. So as far as I understand, though, Cookie Engineer never actually wanted to stay on the project forever. He did eventually want to step down, but I imagine this was a catalyst for speeding that up real fast.
And I can't say as I blame him. It's a lot of work to lead a project, and especially one of this magnitude, that in popularity. Being the maintainer long term, you really need to get some other people up there with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So the last little bit on this is, I was saying that folks that are on Linux will be safe from all of the telemetry and stuff like that, unless this is a double-edged sword here. So Simon Peter will be happy about this, but Audacity, as of 3.0.3 release candidate 1, is available as an app image. But the Audacity maintainers are handling that, which means
that's got everything turned on.
The environmental variables are set and compiled, and you're good. So if you are checking out the app image of 3.0.3 RC1 or RC2, which is available as of now, I don't know for certain, but I would imagine that likely will have the telemetry on.
Yeah.
But hey,
get your Wireshark handy.
A +1 for app image, because hey, we were talking about it on the last episode where we wanted to see more first-party app images in general. Well, here it is.
Well, yeah. Careful what you ask for.
I know. We sure did. Monkey paw right there.
So last up, we've got a little feedback that we want to discuss, and Leo, you brought this one to the attention, so I'll let you discuss a little bit from what you found.
All right. So Jan M in Telegram had just kind of asked a general question, but I ended up hopping on it, ended up talking about it for a little bit, and I thought it was just something cool to kind of bring to the show. So they say, so this might be kind of a foolish topic for some of you, but I always found it strange in Linux, the number of users there is. One of the first things I was told to do on a brand new server as a security check a year ago when I started ops was check for users. Now, I know that I can probably rule most out since they're no login, and what they're talking about there is at the end of the like Etsy password, you can look and see if they have a shell assigned to them,
Right.
and if they don't, it'll be like /sbin/no login or something, and that essentially says you cannot log in.
Right.
So anyway, so to continue on with the message, can I actually? But still, as a new Linux user, there's no antivirus. So my question upon switching to Linux would be, how do I check for stuff? Check the users, I guess, would be step 1 or 2. Definitely there. And I get presented with 30-ish records. For each in the system, I've been told is all about automation. The best I can do is surf the internet for the username and use best judgment. What's your take on this? Is it silly to think this?
Well, no, I think auditing the users that are on your system is a really good thing. However, I would like to think that out of the box, brand new, fresh install, those users that you find there are there for a purpose. And, you're putting some trust into your distribution. And I understand that. But if you compare a fresh install to a running system, I think that gives you a good standard to go from. So
right.
I think that's a good place to start right there. Look at a fresh install and then look at what you have on a running system.
Exactly. That was my suggestion, which was take a baseline.
Yeah, exactly.
Even if you've got to install a fresh version of it in a VM or whatever,
Right.
just take a baseline so you know what users are there. That way you're not having to go in and be like, what is this Avahi user? What is that about?
Yeah, who's
right?
that guy?
I mean, and then you can compare that to your current running list of users. And so the issue really kind of snowballed a little bit because the focus is really on automation.
Sure.
How do you make that automated? So without buying a bunch of software. Oh, well, Dan, what do you think? What are you thinking?
Well, if you're into server administration, there are tools that can handle some of that automation for you and set up your user accounts, automatically. So
they said they were involved in ops.
Right.
So I would
probably
imagine they're
Ansible
close.
or Puppet or
Yes.
Terraform, one of those things, right? That's creating the machines and configuring them out of the box.
Yeah, exactly. That's the best way to do it. A configuration management is the way to handle this. However, not everybody decides they want to spin up an Ansible server at home, though.
Right. But even doing so, you still have a baseline that you can go from because, you use these automation tools and so you've got your fresh install with nothing. Then you've used some automation tools. You can compare those two and see what you've got there. And then if you're really, really paranoid, you can go back in and look at your running system that has all of the things on it and compare that in there too. So yeah, you're doing a lot of stare and compare, but I think that's a really good idea in general anyway.
Yeah, and so if you're doing this manually without any help of configuration management utilities or something like that, you take your baseline, right? You take a text version of a list of all the users on your system from a fresh install, and then you use the program diff, D-I-F-F, that's built into pretty much every Linux system.
I think everything, yeah.
Yep, and then you compare that to a current running list of things, of your users.
Yep.
And then diff will say, all right, here's the difference between those two files.
Right.
And then this way, as you said, it's stare and compare. You're going to have to do that.
A little bit.
But at the very least, you only see what's different between those two files. You don't have to go see, oh yeah, Avahi was there before, Avahi is there now. Okay, cool, that's worthless to me. This will just show you the stuff that has changed since that baseline was taken.
Yep, that's a good idea. Definitely.
Yep.
And you're right. He's right in researching what some of these users do. Go look at Google, if you will, or whatever search engine you prefer. Go see what some of them do. Like, so Avahi, that's for, the discovery protocol, right?
Yeah.
But if you're running a web server, you're going to have, some other users, Apache user, or, if it's MySQL, you're going to have a user for that. Like, all these services also come with users that get put into the system too. So you've got to use a little bit of common sense. Like, you installed the Apache web server, so you're going to have an Apache user. That's not weird, right? So you've got to use a little bit of common sense to go along with it. And
that's the other thing, though, right? Like, if you install MySQL, the server's going to, or the username is likely going to just be called MySQL.
It is, yeah. So, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's the thing. Yeah.
So if you run into like a user string that is like numbers and letters and gibberish and stuff like that, okay, maybe it's time to look.
Sure,
yeah. let's dig in to see what has that user been doing.
Right.
I don't know.
And if they don't have a login, then okay, maybe. But yeah, you could start looking through some logs and find it probably relatively quickly.
Exactly. Journal control is fantastic, especially for folks that aren't loving the fact that you have to look through logs and things like that. It is pretty fantastic. It does let you drill down fairly easily. I mean, if you're more of a manual kind of person, var log and then all the stuff inside of there, usually auth.log will give you a lot of information about who's coming in and out of the system. But
yeah, and grep might be your friend on some of those things to find where that user is in the log too.
Oh yeah, it will.
Mm-hmm.
So what about the second bit? We don't have to spend a lot of time on it, but I mean, the antivirus word comes up, and
does that really help you? I wonder.
It's too late, but at least you know. That's I think what antivirus is good for.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, when anytime the antivirus word comes up in any discussion, especially in Linux groups, the first thing, and as they said, the first thing is Linux users will tell you don't even bother.
Yeah.
But what
Unless
if you
you're
want the
files.
peace of mind? Well, true, especially if you're sharing files, right? But, what if you want the peace of mind? What if it's just ingrained into you from the moment you're born, because you were born with a Microsoft laptop in your hand, that antivirus is integral to the system and is required all of the time? What would you tell someone like that?
There are options. There are antivirus options. ClaimAV is an open source one, right? Mm-hmm. And you can run that. Sophos has a Linux agent that you can install. And now Microsoft Defender, if that was your thing.
Yep, exactly. So I think I haven't.
There may be others
really,
too.
I know there's got to be others, but I know Microsoft has been focusing on Windows Defend. No, it's Microsoft Defender. I forgot they changed it. It's not Windows Defender anymore.
Not anymore.
I forgot.
I heart Linux.
But, yeah, right. Yeah, I can't call it Windows. We're going to put it in Linux. But so Microsoft Defender is because you're in ops, I imagine you'll be touching servers every now and then. So Microsoft Defender is something good that will go on a server. It's not recommended for desktops yet.
Right.
But I wouldn't put it past them by the end of the year to have some kind of beta client ready for testing at least, so we can see what Microsoft Defender could do on the desktop.
Yep. And so here's the thing. I think that it is valuable if you are sharing files with other Windows computers. Having some antivirus on a machine is not a terrible thing, because you can clean those up before they get onto the other Windows machines,
right?
Which is a really good idea.
Yep. It's not going to affect you because you run Linux and it's a Windows binary, but
you can transport it around really nicely.
Exactly, right. That's the scary thing.
Yeah. Yeah, so you're really just protecting other people with the antivirus thing, not so much the Linux machine.
Yeah.
Well, it's true, right?
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, the vast majority of viruses and creepy crawlies out there are meant for Windows or Mac because there are just more people on it.
Yep. Housekeeping.
Housekeeping. Knock, knock.
Hello, Leo. Shall I fluff your pillow?
Yes, tell me about the pillow of community.
The Linux community has some fantastic members, and we want to make sure to highlight that. Our podcast showcase this episode has open source voices. So if you haven't checked out this podcast, JT interviews other open source voices, people that are in the open source community. And there's not a lot of episodes there, but there's a few. And what I've heard is excellent. And I love the deep dive into the individuals that are behind the open source projects.
Yeah, 15 so far.
And so one of the latest ones that I listened to had Neil Gompa. And Neil, I've had some conversations with. And yeah, it was great to hear that.
And one of the first guests was Matthew Miller of the Fedora Project. So
yeah.
these are just amazing talks. And I mean, they talk nerdy to you. So that's always something good.
I love to know how, these people got their start in open source and contributing. And I like to hear about some of the latest projects they're working on.
Yep, exactly.
Feel free to send your emails to contact@linuxuserspace.show and we can have a discussion about them.
See, I even put that one in Geary. See, I really use Geary, I promise. These apps aren't just me throwing random stuff out there.
No, they're actually good apps. We appreciate all of our sponsors on Patreon, and if you would like to join them in supporting the show, you can head on over to patreon.com/LinuxUserspace. Please follow us on Twitter @LinuxUserspace to get all the latest announcements for the show and highlights for things that impact your user space. Please join us over on Telegram at linuxuserspace.show/Telegram to continue the conversation over there.
This is where I'm stealing all the feedback lately.
Yeah, and you'll see some nice little, screenshots from time to time on the distro that we're trying. And sometimes that sparks up a little conversation about that. Or you can head over to our Matrix channel. That room is definitely growing, and I'm really liking Matrix these days. I don't know about you, Leo, but that's probably one of my favorite platforms.
The red thing is weird, where like the reply to the reply or something, it turns it red. That's weird. But I mean, as a chat platform, it's fantastic. There are just some little paper cuts that I would like to see changed up. But I mean, it's good. It's really good. I like it a lot.
Yeah, I think it works really well. But if you're, not totally freedom loving, I suppose you can head over to our Discord channel, and that's pretty popular as well. And I'll have a link down there in the show notes. Lastly, don't forget to rate this podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcast application, and like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube, where we got some video and hopefully some enhancements this time.
Yeah. Look, there's little squigglies. Which way is it? Is it that way?
That way? Down there, and then
down
maybe
there.
some at things up there.
Oh, look at that. Is that one me? I don't know. Maybe that one's me.
Yeah.
One of those is me.
Yeah, you're here somewhere.
Yeah, up there. Up there.
Yeah.
You ready to focus? Oh yeah.
I'm
Push
focused.
them up.
I'm getting there. I got my glasses pushed up. I'm focused now.
There we go. Let's focus. You have two eyes. So we have two apps. That's the deal. I don't know why we did two. Oh wait, I do know why we did two.
I know why we did two. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So we were talking about Audacity before, and some people got spooked. And really quickly you saw, what are the top 20 best alternatives to Audacity? Real fast. It was actually kind of impressive how quickly people were ready to abandon ship.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Or maybe it was just a bunch of clickbait. But, whatever. not the point. So we figured we would jump on that bandwagon. And I feel like this is less of a jump off the Audacity bandwagon and get on this more than it is, you know, what happens if Audacity does make a misstep that's just too far for me personally? What would I do for that? I mean,
I think we should know what the alternatives are. And honestly, there's not a lot, right? There are not a lot of alternatives. There are some people have recommended, but I don't think they are as simple and down to the point of what Audacity is. Audacity is a simple application. You can do some light editing, and it has some things, but it's very simple to use, right?
I mean, there are enough Nyquist plugins that we probably should have been paying for Audacity, $200 each time because of the amount of heavy lifting it can actually do.
Oh yeah, it's very powerful. But if you just want to simple record my thing, it'll do that too.
Right. So I mean, that's really, really important because Audacity can be super simple, but it doesn't have to be. You can make it extremely versatile. And while there are alternatives that'll do all the things, right? I mean, Ardour's out there, Reaper's out there for fairly cheap.
Digital audio workstation things. That sounds impressive.
Exactly. But we're going to focus a little bit more on, what if we had a guest on this show and we didn't want them to have to go through the pain of dealing with Audacity? And in my case, I'm assuming they're on Gnome or some Gnome derivative. And my suggestion would be, you know what? Just go install the Gnome Sound Recorder.
Sure.
Press the record button and then press stop when you're done.
Exactly.
I don't care what format it is because, to be honest with you, would I like a Wave? Sure. Would I like a FLAC? Sure. And it can do those things. But if you're trying to just walk someone that doesn't care about their audio through something and just tell them, press that button, you're done.
Well, how long will it record for, though, Leo?
Oh, my God. Okay, so...
I had to bring that up, didn't I?
Yeah, no, you did. You did. So the last time we talked, I mean, this was kind of something in the making, and we were like, well, what could we use? And I remembered using Gnome Sound Recorder before. So I was like, you know what? I don't know that it can record like more than just a few minutes at a time. Maybe it'll just stop you at 30 minutes or something. I can't have that. So I turned it on, and we did our regular show meeting, and I walked away.
Yeah, you forgot to turn it off. Yeah.
Whoops. And I came back the next day, and it had recorded 17 and a half hours straight.
That's awesome.
I pressed stop. I imported it into Audacity, like you do. It took a while because a 17-hour audio file apparently takes a little while to load up in Audacity. And it worked. It was all there. I mean,
that's impressive.
You could hear me rustling around in the room and all that stuff. And then I came back to it, and it was still going. So, there's no limit. It'll just keep going. It does what you tell it to do. You press record, it'll record forever. So, and the quality is fantastic. It's exact same quality you would get out of Audacity. It pulls it straight in from your microphone, straight in from Pulse. You can choose a bunch of different formats. I mean, MP3, FLAC, Wave, whatever you want.
Right.
Those major formats are there, and it'll just export it, and you can pop it into Audacity or any other audio workstation and just handle it. So, in my opinion, if someone were going to sit down and say, I need you to record this real quick, that's what I would tell them to get: Gnome Software Recorder or Gnome Sound Recorder.
And that's a great solid application, I think. But me coming from a cute desktop environment, I came up with another suggestion, and that's Kwave. And so it's a KDE app, as you can probably guess, with the K in front of it, like all good KDE apps. And
wait a minute, what?
Yeah, I know.
KDE app with a K in front of it? I've never heard that
craziness.
Before. Never.
Craziness with a K.
You did it. Oh,
I totally did. Anyway, it's a great application. I tested that in our meeting as well. I did hit the stop button when we were done, though, but it did record the whole entire time. It was like a 2-hour deal, and it recorded the whole entire time, no problem. Nice. It's a little more cumbersome in the UI, if you will, and so the user experience suffers just a touch. Maybe, I'm not sure, but once you get used to it, I think it would be a fine application to use. I don't think it would take too many times to be able to get used to it. It's just a little bit different in the way it works.
Yeah, and so I loaded okay, so first off, I got to be truthful here. I loaded it up in Linux Mint. I did me a sudo apt install Kwave, and it was like, yeah, sure, but you also got to have these other 90 dependencies. And I was like, that's too many. So
that makes sense in Mint, honestly.
Right. And so I immediately remembered, but wait, I have a KDE-based installation called Chaos on my laptop. So I figured, all right, you know what? That's cool. I'll go install it over there. So I did. And so what you're talking about with the record thing is you can't just go into Kwave and press the little red circle. You press the little red circle, and that brings up another window, which you then have to press the little red circle on. And I thought that was weird, but then I started to think, well, that's kind of how Ardour deals with things, right?
A bit. Yeah, sort of. You gotta set your files up and your formats and all of those things in your sources. So it does prompt you to basically set all of those things up before you record. So I can see why it happens that way. It's just a little counterintuitive if you're coming from a different application.
Right, especially, from Audacity or from Gnome Sound Recorder. I mean, the record button does exactly what you tell it to do. It just records. So when there's a barrier, I think it might throw you off, but you would figure it out.
Yeah, totally. It's not that
there's another red button.
Yeah.
So just press the red button and you're golden. The one thing that I didn't enjoy about Gnome Sound Recorder, and I think it may be because I installed it as a Flatpak, was that the sound wave. There is a wave as you speak, goes up and down. It's not as responsive as it is in Audacity or as it is in Kwave, but I mean it's there.
Yep.
But I'm on a dark theme, and for some reason the Flatpak knew I was on a dark theme, but it didn't change the color of the wave.
Yeah, so that's weird.
My theme is a dark gray, and the wave is a slightly less dark gray. So while you can see it, you got to squint a little bit. And so, I mean, I thought that was a little off-putting, but it still gets the job done. You don't have to see the wave to get the job done. It still recorded. It was still great. It was still editable. I had no issues other than that with it. So I thought it was really good.
Cool thing about Kwave is you can do your editing right there in that application. You don't need to import it into a different one. Yes,
and now Gnome Sound Recorder won't do that. So that was one of the really cool things I saw about Kwave. It seemed to me to be like Audacity Lite.
Yeah, maybe.
It had effects. It had like fade outs. It had some basic gating.
Yeah.
And some other normalization in there as well.
So
I thought it was actually pretty good. Oh, and pitch shift. My daughter really enjoys pitch shift.
Oh yeah. But if you don't need a lot of things, that's kind of like right where you need to be at, I think.
Yep. Absolutely.
So
there you go. There's a super simple one, a mid-grade one, or just use Audacity.
Sure. All right, that brings us to the end of the show. Sad tear rolled down the cheek, but
we'll see you again, I promise.
Next time we will discuss our thoughts on KOS or Chaos. And how that's been coming along. I've been enjoying it, not to give too many spoilers away, but check out that installer. I think that's pretty cool. How's it been going for you, Leo?
Great.
Okay.
Other than
what's
up with the no blur? I can't blur things.
Oh. Well,
things are not blurry.
So one thing that I have been trying is the Wayland session.
Wait, will Wayland fix it for me?
It might, because I do believe there is some blur there that I noticed. So give that a try. I've got some other comments on Wayland, but that's just Wayland in general.
Well, we'll save those. Okay, so yeah, X11 is the default. That's where I've been this whole entire time. I'll swap it over to Wayland and see if we can't blur our thoughts a little bit by the time we come back.